marriage takes a lot of work. And sometimes you can feel exhausted. Sometimes you can be mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted. When you are in that space of like, oh my gosh, this is so much work, I don't know that I can keep doing this type of thing, stay in it. Because the other side of that hard, it gets easier.
We're sitting here in the car, obviously, trying to talk about the different things that we could talk about today. And Melanie says, well, maybe we should talk about this client that we have. We've done some coaching with them and things like that. And
just a couple of sessions.
Yeah, just a couple sessions. They just told Melanie that they were getting separated and then going to go through the divorce. You know, it's heartbreaking. The woman had said she's not in love with the husband anymore. You know, the thing that's really interesting is love is a choice. We use language that is not accurate all the time. And, you know, we say, oh, we fell in love. Like, I didn't have a choice in the matter. I fell into love and I couldn't do anything about it.
It's like a big pothole, right? Just like,
I wasn't looking where I was going and I fell into love. Well, that's a myth and a lie. We don't fall into love and we don't fall out of love either. We choose into love and we choose out of love.
It's interesting as I think about that, just ponder what that actually means in real life, the real life situations, right? Because I want to be very sensitive to their situation and respect them and, you know, their choices and things like that. But it is really heartbreaking because in the conversations that we were having with them, in the work that we were doing with them, both of them seemed to be committed to the process of the work that it would take in order to restore their relationship. And I'm curious as to what the rest of the story is, because we don't have the rest of the story. And just the fact that, you know, she moved out and that they're getting a divorce. I'm just curious as to what that, you know, because we've heard it a lot, you know, well, I can't choose who I love. But the thing is that you absolutely, it is the little tiny choices that you make. I know when Jason and I, when we were going through our challenges, it was very easy to start nitpicking the things that he was doing, so that it justified my behavior. And
you know what's really interesting about justification? I mean, you've heard this 1,000 times, but I don't know that they've heard this 1,000 times.
No,
so they can hear it at least once. But, you know, justification is something that we use in construction. So, you know, when a building goes up or a house goes up, and you've been building it for a while, but now it needs to sit for a little bit. Maybe you just have the walls up, but there's no roof on. Well, when you go back to actually put the roof on, you need to justify the walls. So what that really means is making sure that, because you've had the wall has been attached to the floor and maybe attached to one wall, but the other end of the wall is probably not attached to anything. So that means that over time, that wall can warp because of rain or water. It can do different things like that. And so, you know, we justify the wall, meaning we make it 90 degrees and we make sure it's dead center as to where it needs to be in order to be proper, right, you know, in order to put the roof on. And so you do that as you're putting the roof on. You justify that wall. So you put all the studs in place, but you don't attach the wall to it yet. Then you move it, you justify that wall, make sure it's 90 degrees, and then you attach it to your roof and make sure that everything is, you know, the joists and everything like that. So justification only happens when something is crooked. If it's not crooked, there is no need for it. And we do the exact same things with ourselves. We justify crooked behavior.
In order to justify your own behavior, or whatever, it's really easy. You find reasons. Like, I remember when I was getting frustrated with Jason or whatever, I remember that I would basically look for other reasons and evidence as to why he's annoying, or why I deserve better, or why, all of that mentality.
Which there are times when she definitely deserves somebody better than me because I'm showing up like in my worst self or something like that.
There's also the other side of that, right? But that has to do with me. That has to do with how I choose to see you.
Correct.
And so when I choose to see you as your potential, as your best self, even when you're not showing up that way, that's a reflection on me. And that if I choose to look to that and then find evidence as to why I love you, why you're amazing and stuff, it's that whole reticular activating system in your brain that when you are focused on something, you're telling your brain what's important to you. And so
you're telling your brain what to look for.
Exactly. And so whether it's in yourself or in somebody else, that you are making a decision. You are choosing what you're doing. And so choosing what you're seeing in the other person, when I choose to see you in your best light and in your best attitudes and everything, showing up as that I know you the person to be,
then I'm pretty amazing.
Exactly. You are amazing. And so am I. But that is the beauty of it. But I just don't think that enough people realize the choices that they're making, that they think that it's the other person. We talked about this yesterday about blame, that you're blaming the other person. Well, they've changed, or they stopped doing the things that they did. And that may be true. They may have stopped romancing you. They may have stopped helping around the house or doing those things. But
when those things have happened, are you looking only at them, or are you looking at what you have changed? Because typically when somebody has changed, it's a reaction to something that somebody else has done.
Right.
So we get to be real clear that I might have changed, but is it because I've perceived some change in her and now I'm justifying my behavior change? Or is it just because I'm tired? I mean, I could be tired, I could be hungry, I could be sexually frustrated, whatever it might be. But typically for men, it's one of three things. Women, it might be a few more things, like hormones and things like that too.
Yeah.
But for men, it's usually one of those three things. If I'm not feeling loved, if I'm feeling hungry, if I'm feeling really tired, that affects me big time as to how I respond to what you've done.
This also goes back to communication as well.
No, communication doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Right? But it as far as, instead of, if something happens, for instance, let's say you're just not, you are more tired, you seem disinterested, you seem disconnected, you seem those type of things or whatever.
Are you talking about yesterday?
No, I actually wasn't talking about yesterday, but we could talk about yesterday. No, I'm just saying that in general, that, and even like past years, right?
Of course.
That instead of me assuming things, instead of me building a story as to why you're behaving that way or what the actual underlying thing is going on, if I just came to you and said, this is the behavior that I'm noticing, and I'm just curious as to what may be going on underneath that kind of behavior, because for instance, when we first got married, blah blah blah, you did XYZ, and now it's not like that anymore. What has changed for you? And those kind of conversations. Go ahead.
The thing that's amazing is this is not just something that she's talking about. This is something she practices regularly, and so do I, where if something is off or different about the other person, we will often come to the other one and say, hey, your behavior's out of sorts
Right.
from normal.
Right.
And is there something that I have done?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. Do you know what it is? No. Okay. Are you tired, hungry, or do you need love? And if the answer is no on those, okay, let's dig a little deeper and let's
Right.
find out, okay, what is going on? What are you feeling? What are you thinking about? What's going on in
What
your
is, yeah,
mind that's spinning,
yeah, what is the
that's
internal dialogue?
circling?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
internal dialogue that is constantly going. And the thing is we sometimes don't even realize that it's happening.
correct.
It just is happening. And we get in a funk, we get in a bad mood. Like yesterday, we were playing racquetball, and I'm hardly ever grumpy when we
Like
play racquetball.
like out of 1,000 games, she was this way once, and it was yesterday. I mean, she's never in a funk when we're playing racquetball. She's always enjoying herself. Now, me on the other hand, that's different. I, if I start losing, I'm a poor loser, generally speaking, and so if I start losing, then I can get in a funk real quick. But when she loses, which is
all the time.
a normal thing, then she doesn't get in a funk. But yesterday she was, and I asked her, and she's like, and
Just like that.
and so we just left it alone until later on. And she said, "Well, I just wasn't playing normal. I was trying this new serve," and I was like, "Yeah, you were trying a new serve, and it was kicking my butt."
But I wasn't getting enough practice anyway. Anyway, that's regardless of it. But that is the point as far as just that unnatural behavior. And like for instance, when there's been times when, all of a sudden like it seems out of the blue where you'll like snap at me or you'll be, grumpy, and I'm like, you know what? This isn't your normal behavior. This isn't how you would normally treat me. So what's going on? Being willing to have those kind of open communications. Now, guys, we've been married for 25 years. So it's not like we just learned this, like we've been practicing this for years now, which is why it comes easier to us. But the point is to start practicing and to not expect perfection or not making mistakes in the beginning and stuff. We had a lot of blunders when we started trying to have these conversations. They were long drawn out conversations because like,
painful.
No, I believe that, whatever, going back and forth, but it's been so worth it.
Back in the early days, asking a question like that would sometimes spark an argument.
Yeah, it could.
And now it almost never does. I mean, now it's like, oh, I see where you're coming from. You love me and you care about me. You really want to know and understand where I'm coming from. And so we can have that dialogue. At the beginning, I don't know that we necessarily really understood that the other person was coming from a pure space of love.
Right.
But we know that now.
We probably weren't coming from a pure space of love, right?
Come on, we're perfect.
Anybody that knows us knows differently. We do not pretend to be perfect.
Oh, I pretend in my own mind to be perfect.
Yeah. So I guess my encouragement today is to take a minute and just listen to the other person and be willing to own your own stuff, own your own stories, and accountability that you are making choices every day. So what choices do you really want? And what are the end results? What are the consequences of those choices? Because making the decision that you don't love that other person anymore, like
it's
what
a
is
choice.
the fallout? What is the fallout? You have a child involved, you have extended family involved, you have that other person that you committed to love. You made a covenant, a commitment to love that person regardless of what happened.
It used to be said that, we married in health and sickness, in,
rich or poor,
things like that. Almost nobody even believes that anymore. We have friends. We have a friend who, she got sick and he left and she passed away, but he left long before and he was never there for her during the majority of her sickness. What's up with that? That man is not a man. He chose to be a loser. And why? Why did he choose to be a loser instead of choosing to love his wife, whom he fell in love with at one point? And he chose out of that relationship and lost on so many levels from this wonderful woman. And we see it all the time. But I see it more often that women are choosing out, not men.
I was
90% of, well, it's 70% of all divorces are
filed
by women. If they're educated, meaning they have a college degree, 90% are filed by women. So, there's a major issue. And women, I'm going to be a little bit bold here. I'm going to say that women pretend, and I use that word intentionally, women pretend that they've done all the communicating that needs to happen to let their husbands know they're not happy. And yet, when the divorce papers are filed, majority of all men had no clue it was coming. So what kind of communication are you women giving to your man? It's certainly not clear communication. And you women can hate on me about this. I don't care, because these are facts. If you're not communicating in a way that he understands what you're trying to communicate, it's not called communication.
Right.
And in order for you to communicate clearly, you really have to know, do they understand what I'm saying? I mean, how many conversations have you and I had where we were communicating, we thought, and yet I was very clear and you had no idea what I was even talking about.
Exactly.
Or vice versa.
Right.
You were very clear, and I do air quotes because the communication wasn't there.
Right.
It wasn't a clearly communicated thing that I understood you to say or you understood me to say.
Well, what's interesting too, though, even with that, is that if you are communicating and I'm saying, like I can repeat what it is that you are saying.
It doesn't mean understanding.
Does not mean, absolutely, because I am taking that information and it's being filtered through my filters.
Correct.
Through my past experience. And so I may have a different interpretation of what those words actually mean.
Well, and how many times have you and I had conversations about a specific word and what that word meant? And regardless of whether you were right or I was right about the definition of the word, we still weren't communicating.
Right.
Regardless.
Right. And
because we didn't have the same understanding of that word.
Right.
And so in order to communicate, that's one of the biggest problems with language. We use our words to communicate rather than our minds, meaning I can't meld my mind with hers and she melds her mind with mine. And we use ESP to just communicate emotions.
Right? Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be awesome. But
maybe in heaven.
we don't do that. So all we have is words and body language and tone, and they are woefully inadequate.
Absolutely. Which is why you have to be willing to have a lot of mercy, a lot of grace in your relationship
with each other and with yourself.
Yeah, and so you know what? This was the interpretation that I created from that. This is how I received that. And so this is why I chose, here's what I thought you said. Here's how I interpreted what that meant. And so these were the actions that I took in order, to be in line with what I thought you were wanting. And if that wasn't right, then instead of saying, well, oh, you're an idiot, or you're not listening to me, or, those type of hurtful things to say, that you are choosing to give them the benefit of the doubt that they were meaning to do the best that they knew how.
And they were trying to understand. I mean, how many times have we tried to communicate well between the two of us and we failed miserably? And it was just a matter of going back and saying, okay, let's try this conversation again. Let's do a do-over conversation. And because clearly that didn't work.
Right.
And so then we go back and we recommunicate and we understand a little better, a little differently. It's a very powerful tool to do do-overs.
Yeah. I just want to encourage that, yes, marriage takes a lot of work. And sometimes you can feel exhausted. Sometimes you can be mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted.
Yeah, but they know that.
They do know that. However, it like acknowledging that, and it's like when you are in that space of like, oh my gosh, this is so much work. I don't know that I can keep doing this type of thing. Like, just stay in it. Because the other side of that hard, it gets easier. The more and more that you're willing to stay in the hard with each other, the easier it becomes. And the more you do get to more quickly recover, because you're still going to be having these conversations. But the thing is that it's not going to be as full of angst and frustration and stuff. It's going to be resolved more quickly. And you're going to have more space in between, like the really hard conversations.
For sure. So the last thing that we'll leave you with is what this reminds me of is if you've ever seen Mr. and Mrs. Smith, one of my favorite all-time shows is about marriage. I love the show. I love everything about it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. But at the very end of at the beginning of the movie, it starts off with them in counseling. And the counselor asks them about sex, how often they're having it. And he says 1 to 10. And he goes,
I don't understand
the question. 1 is 0 and 10 is like all the time. I don't understand the question. And so then at the end of the movie, it goes to he says, ask me about sex question. And he goes, that is the way marriage can be, is it can be a 10.
Absolutely.
Now all the time, absolutely not.
No, we're human.
But normally, yeah, absolutely. It can be amazing. So anyway, have hope.
Take courage.
Know that you can do it. We love you.
And we're here. See you later.